Hi, everybody. It is week number 7, which is a very busy week for us. So let's get going right off the bat. So last week you learned about Mendelian genetics and different types of inheritance like dominant and recessive traits and how those are expressed. We used Punnett squares to help us figure out what different types of possible offspring you could get from different crossings of individuals. And so you learned about some genetics, which is really good because it helps you understand how inheritance works, how traits are passed along into offspring, and how they are expressed. This week we're going to learn about relationships in biology. So first of all, food webs. Who eats whom out there in ecosystems? So you will be building a food web. There are instructions in this week's lab. So how to build a food web using organisms from the Everglades. So you're going to draw out these relationships so that you get an idea of the lizard eats a mosquito, and then a snake eats a lizard, and then a hawk eats the snake, that sort of thing. That would be considered a food chain, but you're going to show the relationships between at least 10 individuals out there in the Everglades and how they are related to each other. Population dynamics we'll study this week. How populations work. So a population is members of a species that live together in a place and time. Population dynamics is studying birth rates and death rates and immigration. And immigration, there's two types, moving into an area, moving out of an area. And also you'll be studying demographics, and you'll be doing this with a simulation with some cards that represent gravestones. So you're going to be looking at two populations of human beings in this particular exercise to compare them. So if you look at every individual born in a certain time period and you compare the men to the women, you're going to look at how many of them die over every 10-year period. And so that is very interesting to look at. I remember one time when I went to visit my cousin, and she took me to Reno, Nevada, and then we went to Virginia City in Nevada, and we walked through a graveyard, and that was very, very interesting. I noticed that there were a lot of young women between the ages of, say, 16 and 22 who died. And that wasn't true for lots of the men. So I got to thinking about that, and I said, oh, dummy, yeah. They died because of childbirth. Back then, out in the Wild West, there wasn't any help for a woman when she was giving birth, so a lot of women died during childbirth. So that was interesting to look at those gravestones from way back when and figure that out. So you're going to be doing a little bit of that. So this week, what do you have to do? So Lab 7.1 is the lab on the food webs. There are some questions that you need to answer, plus you're going to include this drawing of the relationships in this food web that you're going to set up. So that's one thing that you have to do. And then Lab 7.2 is all about carrying capacity. You're going to represent birds on an island with some beans that you have in your kit. You're going to have to follow the directions carefully because that one's a little bit complicated as to how many die off and how many offspring you can have and the territories and that sort of thing. So just read the instructions carefully. You'll get it. And then demographics with the gravestone cards that you have. Realize with this one that you are comparing two groups of individuals. So you can compare all the people who were born between 1800 and 1850 as compared to those born 1851 to 1900. You can compare those two groups, or you could compare males and females who were born during the same time period. You need 50 from each group, so that's 100 different individuals on these cards, and you have the cards, so you'll do okay with that. One word about this, there is an activity 4. Do not do activity 4. That's looking up more information, and you have got plenty to do because there are 3 different activities. in this lab, and it is going to take you a little while to do. So I'm just telling you that up front. That one's going to take a while. I do want to mention, since we're talking about population dynamics, that sometimes there are huge population explosions. We see this all the time in nature. For example, we've gotten a little bit of rain here finally after many weeks of no rain, and all of a sudden, boom, we get a hatch out of mosquito larvae. So, yes, we have mosquitoes everywhere now. So you'll see this from time to time, population explosions. And I wanted to give you this example, which is really interesting because it has to do with a population explosion and some ancient American Indian folklore. So in American Indian folklore, there was a saying that if it rains in the spring, if the spring rains come, then young men will die. And that was true. No one knew why until in the 1990s. So at the four corners of the United States, this region where Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona all come together, in this area, there was an outbreak of some type of disease in 1993 where young people were dying of a pneumonia-like disease, and they were becoming sick very, very quickly and dying very quickly. And we didn't know what was causing this. Well, we figured out through PCR, you remember that technique, through PCR, that their disease was caused by a hantavirus. And now we know about hantaviruses. But it was caused by a hantavirus that had not been known about before then. And this hantavirus causes a pneumonia-like syndrome, and you can die very quickly, especially if you have a nice, healthy immune system. So what happens then is that your immune system is very healthy and active, and it attacks the cells that are infected with hantavirus. Your lungs fill up with fluid, and you basically can't breathe any longer. So that was a hantavirus. But what was the connection between the hantavirus and these young people? Well, we figured out that the hantavirus was carried by mice. And in fact, that spring, there had been plenty of rain in this normally arid type of environment. And that caused many plants to reproduce and produce lots and lots of seeds. That means that the mouse population exploded and the mice got into places where people would normally be. So that was the connection, and that American Indian folklore, if the spring rains, then young men will die. This directly applied to this particular situation. So this had been going on for even hundreds of years. And the American Indians realized that they could figure out this relationship between the spring rains and death of young men. They had already figured it out a long time ago, and we only figured out in 1993 that the deaths were caused by hantavirus. So that's a good example of what happens sometimes when populations explode. I say here, watch out using the gravestone cards because they are put into order according to how old the person is when they die. I think that's how it goes, as I remember correctly. So watch out for the gravestone cards and make sure you're picking the ones that you want to pick. Okay? I hope that makes sense. Just look at them and look at them carefully so you pick the right ones. All right, and then finally, you also have your final project submission. So I told you this is going to be a busy week. So this week, you also have to complete your experiment. Yeah, lots to do. You have to complete your experiment and make your presentation. Make sure that you go back and review what I wrote about milestone 1 and milestone 2 for you. I just finished the milestone 2 grading yesterday, so you do have those now. Make sure you look at those and change your experiment, change your presentation accordingly, because I made a lot of comments. There were very few that I just said, yep, this looks great, do it just like that. So I had suggestions for almost everyone. So make sure you do that, and fix your experiments accordingly. You're going to make a presentation. 7 to 10 slides is great. Include graphics, include pictures, include data if you can find any. Include your data in graph form. If you're not sure about how to graph your data, please just let me know. I'll be glad to let you know what's appropriate for that data set that you have. And don't forget to include information from your references about your background information. What is the significance of this? Why are you looking at how saltwater and freshwater freeze? What's the importance of that? Are you just doing it because that was a suggestion? Oh, don't put that. So what's the significance of this? Why do you need to know how many nerve endings you have on your fingertips versus your back? Why do you need to know if Manduka caterpillars grow faster at 20 degrees than 30 degrees? You know, why? So use your references. Also use your references to support the results that you got. Okay, so you'll be putting together those final projects this week also. Like I said, there's a lot to do. So get started, and if you have any questions, please remember to email me. I'm here for you. If you need to face-to-face with me at some point, just email me. We'll set up a time. I have time during the week to do this with you. So just let me know. All right, let's have a good week. We are almost finished with this term, so let's get going with this week and push through.